Hello there. I'm here with the lovely Olivia, who's going to introduce herself in a second. And we're just going to have a conversation about our work together and the impact that it's made. So go ahead, Olivia, introduce yourself.
Amazing. Hi, guys. My name's Olivia Vizachero. I am a life coach for lawyers. I'm a former lawyer myself, and I started my business in 2020 and have been coaching ever since. And I worked with Jess. I'm very good at powering through and sort of taking action in spite of my negative emotions, but I really didn't have a great ability to process my emotions and like learn how to be with them. So that's one of the reasons that I came to work with Jess, and she really helped me with all of that.
Awesome. Let's dive into that. So,
Yeah.
did you know, oh, this is some work that I would like to do, and I'd like to do it with Jess?
Yeah, what a great question. So I think the first thing that really jumps out to me is I could see some of my avoidant behaviors, right? So like definitely buffering with things like alcohol or just having a hard time sitting in certain types of discomfort. Like I'm really good at powering through some emotions. Like I'm very good at feeling exposed and I can take action in spite of that. But like learning how to feel bored, I think
Mhm.
that's one of the emotions that you and I worked on a ton, learning how to expand my capacity for that and being able to sit with that instead of trying to escape it. And then also, I went through, you and I have talked about this, but I would have never described myself as someone who like suffered trauma.
Mhm.
But when I started to unpack it and we started to use like different terminology around some of the experiences that I've gone through in my life, I'm like, oh, well, I've had that happen to me. Oh, well, I've had that happen to me. Oh, well, I've had that happen to me. I've been through that. And getting to a point where the way I would describe it, I was sort of like numb to feeling certain emotions. And like good example of this would be I lost a really good friend of mine when I was in my early 20s to suicide. And I would often tell people, I'm like, if you get like an amount of sadness that you're allowed to feel, like an allowance for your whole lifetime, I used it all on that. And a lot of other quote unquote sad things had happened since then. And I was really just like disconnected and felt sort of robotic, where I'm like, oh, that just doesn't even faze me. Obviously, that's like a defense mechanism. I can see it being that now, but recognizing that's not a healthy relationship to your emotions. And I really felt like almost I wasn't able to emote, and I would watch other people emote. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of negative things that come out of that. Like, one, you just don't have a healthy relationship with your own emotions, but also it really made me lack empathy for people.
Mm.
And in becoming someone who's able to feel things all the way through, uh, which is great and not great. Like it's been one of my experiences since our work together. I'm like, oh, you really feel things. Interesting. Like all the way through. But it's such a healthier relationship with my emotions because I'm not avoiding them and I'm able to properly feel something all the way through. Doesn't mean that it's going to be amazing 100% of the time, but it's definitely healthier. But I've expanded my empathy for other people's emotional responses where I'm like, oh, I deeply get what you're going through and I don't judge your emotional response to something. I have so much more deference or respect for it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to note because I think that sometimes, people think that coaching or learning how to unpack our emotions or understand them, because I really see emotions as something to understand, not manage or be scared of or push
Yeah.
away. Um, and they think there's we're never going to feel anything shitty ever again, right?
Yes.
And really it is about, and I was just saying this to somebody else today, I think about emotional freedom is the ability to feel your emotions without feeling that you are going to die, or
Mhm.
that feeling of feeling disconnected or alone
Yeah.
in what anything that is going on.
Yeah. I totally agree with you.
how how have things changed for you
Yeah.
now?
So I'd say the biggest thing, and this is really one of the things that I came to work with you on, was I wanted to be known and seen and more connected to the people in my life, right? I really felt like everyone got the version of me that was very carefully manufactured to be the person who like had it all together all the time. And that left me feeling very isolated, very unknown, very unseen, very disconnected from the people in my life because I wasn't always doing amazing
Mhm.
and I wouldn't share that with anyone. So I had to learn how to just be with my own emotions and be okay with them, and then take the next step further to be able to share that with other people around me. And I have definitely accomplished that. And I have better relationships with basically like everyone in my life as a result of it. I also feel so much less alone. I feel more known, more seen, more connected to the people closest to me. It's been really wild. I've been thinking about this of like since we worked together and then like recording this now. I feel like this is the perfect time to have this conversation just because I'm like living in the after for a little while. And I went through honestly like the worst heartbreak of my life in August. So a little over 6 months ago. And to go through that after having worked with you has been such an interesting experience. And I think one of the things that I can deeply say is I'm so proud of myself for how I've navigated that because I truly feel like I felt this all the way through. And, I cried more than I've ever cried in my life. And I opened up to people and I didn't fake it and I didn't pretend to be okay. And I let myself be okay in my not okayness and I let other people see me in it. And it created really an incredible situation where I was able to receive support, like emotional support from the people in my life and just feel very connected to them. And learning to love myself and like I would say my humanity, which is one of the things that I feel like I got out of our work together. I always say like I just feel so much more myself and
Mm.
so much more comfortable being myself. I think that's been the probably the biggest win or takeaway from our work. And then I've seen it play out. Like it's one thing when you're doing stuff in your business, and I've definitely used our work to help me in my business. I think that's one of the reasons that I came to you originally. But in my personal life, to be able to navigate something as heavy as what I've gone through and to do it without, much buffering, much escapism, anything like that. And just to really be okay, not needing it to end, not needing it to get over, not needing to expedite it, just letting it run its course.
Yeah, I think it's so much more empowering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be able to say to ourselves and truly know deeply, like, I can feel this thing and I'm going to get back up and come back like better than ever. And I'm going to take care of myself in this versus telling ourselves that like we have to be fearless,
Yeah.
right? We're human beings. We do scary things all of the time. And there is nothing more scary than feeling our emotions and then like letting other people see
Mhm.
all of us and, being prepared or like worried about that rejection.
Totally. And as I've expanded my own capacity to sit with mine, I've expanded my capacity to sit with other people's. And it's been very interesting to watch other people sort of lack that capacity. So going through a really emotionally trying experience, having friends who don't have the ability to sit in bigger emotions, where they would say things like, "Oh, you dodged a bullet." And I'm like, "Oh, that feels really like unaligned or misaligned with where I'm at right now. Like I'm just sad and I don't need to like slap, I don't know, a mantra or a line of thinking on this to like make it feel better or to make it a positive thing. Like I can just be sad right now."
Yes.
And how much healthier that felt than what I've done in the past, where it's like sort of that toxic positivity or trying to like find the silver lining or rationalize your way out of it, like just allowing myself to be in it.
Mm-hmm. What blanked out for a second. So I'm going to ask a different question then. How has it impacted your business? Because I do think that that is interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of times people come to me when entrepreneurs come to me, they're coming to me, they've heard of EFT through, they've heard of maybe some kind of manifestation tool, or they want to create something in their business. And typically it all comes back to something in our personal lives, right?
Yeah.
can you say to kind of that piece and that impact?
Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, one of the things that we worked on was my ability to feel embarrassed,
Mhm.
right? Or to feel messy. I think that has been such a profound shift for me. Like, I remember the day we coached on it and you were like, messy to who though? Like, what if messy is subjective and all of this stuff? And I've used that and I've come back to it so many times and just giving myself permission to be messy or to feel messy, to feel like I don't have everything dialed in and everything's not perfectly put together, and how that gives me space to experiment or try new things or to grow, and just changing my expectation for what growth in my business. These Zoom, it's going to get recorded. It's just fine. I'm Italian and I talk with my hands. I can't help it. Um, but changing my expectation for what like business growth looks like and how I experience business growth and change in an emotional way, right? Like I can make the best plan
Mhm.
available to me, and also it is going to be an emotional experience. So expanding my capacity. And I think that's what drew me to our work. I was listening to other entrepreneurs and talk about work that they had done on themselves as they were scaling their businesses and getting to the next level. And I remember one woman in particular, she was like, clean your shit up before you go to this next level. And I just remember hearing that. And I was like, oh, that is the work that I need to do. Like, that's my next level because I teach a concept, as you know, called gag and go, which is like power through the discomfort and take action anyways. And I'm very good at doing that, but learning to feel some of maybe the softer emotions, right? Like messy or imperfect or embarrassed or, uncertain, things like that. Like learning to expand in my capacity for some of that stuff or vulnerable. Um, I knew I was going to keep avoiding that and it was going to stunt my growth. So as I've given myself permission, I'd say messy above anything else. Like I didn't experiment much in the beginning of my business. I followed a pretty rigid formula and it really worked. But
Mhm.
then to get to the next level, I've had to do some experimenting that I think a lot of people have done at an earlier level that I didn't do. So it's like you're going to experiment somewhere at some point in time, either in the very beginning or after some stuff has worked. My personal opinion would probably be that it's scarier to experiment once you've done some stuff that works because you're like, don't break it, like leave it alone. So giving myself permission to play with things and to do that in a way like it's in front of more people because my audience is bigger, and to let people be confused about what I'm doing or to have judgments around what I'm doing and just to sit in that like messy middle. As I've learned, I don't know that I would have had the courage to experience those emotions before our work together.
Yeah, I think that that is something important to think about too, in terms of like a gag and go, right? Because I think sometimes people think about that and they think they just have to like grab it and get through something and never think about it again. And
Yeah.
I really think of like, and not a lot of people know this, but like there is a difference between courage and there's a difference between bravery. And
Hmm.
courage is something you cultivate over the long term, like over and over and over again. Whereas bravery is something that we usually choose in a moment where like something feels dangerous to
Yeah.
us. Right? And so that's what I think about in terms of like gag and go, because you're doing all this work, but you are still an entrepreneur. And the greatest skill you can build in being an entrepreneur is the ability to sit with that creative tension that I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know
Yes.
how it's going to be received. I don't know if somebody is going to like make fun of this or think it's dumb or
Hmm.
whatever. And we can cultivate the courage to do that. The fear still comes up in those pockets. And that's when we get to like choose the bravery in that moment, just being like, okay, let's go. We're
Yeah.
going to go and do this and get our information and then do it again, easier and better.
For sure. And for anyone who's watching this, I think the thing that really drew me to EFT, like I'm an exceptional coach and I have an incredible ability to coach myself on my thoughts, right? And I think, I'm trained through the life coach school and there's such a heavy emphasis on, we'll just change your thoughts, we'll just change your thoughts, we'll just change your thoughts. And through my own self-coaching and my own IP development and coming up with my own way that I coach my clients, I've learned, I'm like, yeah, it's definitely your thoughts. And like, it's twofold. It's really always two things. So I always describe it to, akin to driving a stick shift, where it's like, yes, we're cultivating new thoughts, and also we're learning how to navigate our emotions. Because
Yes.
sometimes your thoughts are really fucking sticky,
Yeah.
right? So the only answer can't be just get new thoughts, just get new thoughts, just get new thoughts, because you just get stuck there. So I came up with like a second route. You can change the thoughts and by all means work to do that, but that process might be slow going. So you also have to learn how to work with your feelings as well. And what does that look like? So change your thoughts, allow the feelings, change your thoughts, allow your feelings. And I knew that I had one way to do that, but I wanted another way to navigate my emotions in a way that was a little bit more, I think, loving and accepting of my humanity
Hmm.
rather than like just always the, grit your teeth and power through, grit your teeth and power through. So I really feel like I got that ability out of a modality that might be, I remember you and I talking, but like a little woo for me, but the woo stuff works for me because I'm so good at doing the other stuff by myself.
Yeah. And like EFT is evidence-based and it's
Yes.
based in science, it's evidence-based, it's peer-reviewed, it's all of those things. There's so many numerous studies out there on it. And I think because, and it's not new, right? It's been around forever, but it feels new to people. It feels weird because I mean, I remember 4 years ago when I had just heard about EFT. I remember watching somebody and I was like in a corner, like observing this at the time, being like, that shit looks weird. I'm not touching my face. Like,
Yeah.
what's that? Right. And thankfully I had that during the pandemic because
Mhm.
it was a complete game changer. And I think too, like, EFT is the tool that you can take to use for anything all the time. And then the work that we're doing in sessions is that like much deeper work where it's like, where did these like initial things come from? Because there is a reason why all of us have different thoughts about different circumstances, right? And
Yes.
often go back to childhood ways of thinking and typically between the ages of 0 and 6. And we make decisions about ourselves and our place in the world based on those things. So it's like
Yeah.
loosening that and then being able to talk to ourselves about how we're experiencing
Mhm.
having emotions and knowing that exactly like you said, thought work and mindset is not just about, oh, I have to change my mind about this. It's about
Yes.
how do we take care? How do I take care of my body? So like
Mhm.
my body and mind are on the same page. And that's really what EFT is doing. It's like bringing the two into balance. I like to think of them as like Google Translate between head and heart.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense to me. I've really started expanding my definition of mindset to include the emotional aspect of it, of like figuring out how to not manage as in manhandle, right? But like in order to healthily navigate your emotions, it's like, yes, cultivate the thought process that supports you in the best way possible. And then the second prong of it is navigating your emotional experience in a way that allows you to move forward in a way that supports your development and growth and experience and whatnot. And I think there's too much emphasis on the mind part of mindset.
Yeah, the mind can be helpful in the beginning because that's what allows you to then start using different tools, right? Because if
Yes.
you're thinking to yourself so much like, nope, that's weird, I'm not doing it, right? Versus like, all right, how do I cultivate a way of thinking about things that might be unfamiliar to me
Yes.
so that it allows me to take risks and open myself up. And you're right, it's just then always the between the two. That's why I think of my work is so like bespoke or like custom to whoever I'm working with, because sometimes there might be several sessions where it's a very like energy focused, and then it's like, okay, now that like body is on board and they're in sync, the coaching then takes like such like much quicker and clearer route there.
Yeah. And, Even as you say that, I'm thinking of things that I remember like at one time seemed impossible for me. And then like I'm living in the results afterwards. So I remember coaching on whether or not I would move and like upgrade my lifestyle very significantly for me, right? Like quadrupling or um, d- by five, timesing by five the amount that I spend on my living expenses every month. And like the fear that had washed over me of, am I going to be able to sustain it? Is it unknown? And like as we're having this conversation, I'm living in one of those places that we talked about, and I remember having so much resistance to it, and then just like sort of like ice melting, sitting with it and working through it and making decisions in alignment with it. So as much as obviously like feeling in your body feels amazing, or feeling good in your body feels amazing, and being able to just navigate what's going on in your body is great. Also, this relates to very tangible results, right? Of improving your overall quality of life and having the world around you match with what you want for yourself.
What are some of those other tangible results that have been created now?
Yeah, so definitely improved. I think this is a little intangible, but like improved relationships with the people in my life. So that would be one. Definitely, I've given myself more permission to take more time off. I know one of the things that we talked about that like blew my mind. You were like, I'm creating a business around my life, not a life around my business. And I was like, oh, I am not doing that. I am on the opposite side of it. So I now make decisions through that framework where I'm like, well, what would you do if you were building a business around your life, not a life around your business? And I'm taking a lot of time off this year, and just continuing to take more and more time off and coaching myself through the discomfort that comes up with that, of what will my clients think? Will people be okay with that? So that's definitely something. Moving was a huge one, both moving across the country and then upgrading my lifestyle to live in furnished places in a way that is really beautiful for me. Changing things in my business
Mm-hmm.
like more rapidly than I probably would have to begin with, or being willing to make changes of what I believe isn't working, rather than being worried about the perception of, oh, I'm changing this. I just announced this and I'm changing it, or giving myself grace. Like I went through this really horrific breakup in August, and I had a whole business timeline for the rest of the year. And I was like, and no, we're not doing that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the emotional capacity. And I'm, rather than like beating myself up or punishing myself and forcing myself to execute a plan, that all of the resistance in my body was like coming up for that. I was just like, or we just wait till after the new year. Like you can also do that. And that required me to allow myself to feel embarrassed in front of other people, or judged or misunderstood by people, exposed, and being able to really have my own back with that. Um, I remember one of the things we've coached on, which has come up quite a bit. I've really expanded my capacity to feel misunderstood. And yeah, for how that comes up in like dating relationships, and really having my own back on like, that's an absolute no for me. That is a boundary. Like, no, thank you. Yes, you can think I'm a bitch. I'm fine with that. Like, whatever your judgment is about me, my job is to take care of myself. And I remember when we were talking about me going to Mexico City on that date, like working through, well, what do you want to do? How will you know? How would you trust yourself? I think that's something that's a little bit, again, more intangible, but it manifests out in this tangible way. I just, I think I said this to you once before, but like, I just like me so much now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I just feel so comfortable with like, I feel like I know exactly who I am. I just started dating someone recently, and the dating experience with him has been so much fun
Mm-hmm.
because I feel so much more settled and like self-assured,
Yeah.
and being able to be in the world as that version of me versus like me in my 20s, which was very like insecure, or I want you to choose me, or like seeking approval and validation from other people. I just don't feel that way now
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Yeah. That's amazing.
It
Um,
really is.
Yeah, it's such a gift. And it's funny, like, I'm gonna just say something and anyway, um, Olivia, you can tell she's gorgeous, poised, and she's kind of known for always like being in heels, right? And drinking fine wines. But the last time I saw you in person, you had on flats and were drinking a beer.
Yes.
Like you were just like, yeah, it's amazing what happens when you work with somebody who gives you permission to be who you are, or something like that. And it was just so fun because there was, we've known each other in a friendship and a colleagueship, even outside of client and coach. And so getting to be on both sides of that for me was really fun.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good example because I would say like I'm so much more robust or well-rounded. I think I was always that way, but I wanted to project a certain image to the world, right? And now I have such an expansive view of like, yes, I can be very polished and sophisticated, and also the person who drinks beer and bowls and wears flats. And I think before working with you, I would have given certain people permission to see this version and certain people permission to see this version, but it would have been very compartmentalized and bifurcated. Where now I'm like, no, 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 that's all me and everyone can see it.
Yes.
And like, I love all of these parts of me. And I was never ashamed of any of them, but like, I just really wanted to carefully manicure people's like reception of me, I guess is the way that I would explain it. And being really unbothered by that now, where I'm like, you could just get to see all of this and form whatever opinion you want is fine, but I'm good with it. And I don't think one thing takes away from another thing or one thing adds. It's just all me.
Yeah. And we need all that, right? Like that's what makes all of us like unique. It's what makes life feel more fun. It makes what certainly business feel more fun and
Yeah,
flow. Like how much energy has that given back to you?
a lot. You just think so little about stuff that I would have typically given so much thought to. And I also think I'm just having more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like you don't have to carefully construct all of these different aspects of your life or all of your presence in these different relationships. Like you just get to free yourself up and show up as who you want. And again, I think it goes to like my goal I guess we started working together in early 2022. Sounds right to me.
So yes, because we worked together for about a year, because it was
Yeah.
two like consecutive 6-ish month packages. And then it's been about a year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I
So
think we wrapped up like right
yeah.
around this time last year. And what was I going to say? Just really giving myself permission to like be fully me. The thing that I was going to say, like, I deeply wanted to feel known by people. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're carefully manufacturing the version of you that people get, it's like everyone saw a sliver of me, but no one ever had the complete picture, right? So like this person might get the over the top version. This person might get the really professional polished version. This person might get the dive bar, shooting darts, like drinking whiskey version. Like, and I'm all of those things. And being able, like, I never felt known by anyone because I'd only show them a sliver.
Mm-hmm.
So you would lack all of the complexity, right?
Yeah.
And being able to just be like, oh no, this is all me and I'm dynamic has
Mm-hmm.
been so freeing.
Really love that, because I think that I've joked before, like I'm a woman of contradictions because I give myself permission to change my mind about things, right? We're
Yeah.
taking in new information every single day. And I think that served me for a little bit because I used to have this deep fear of looking like a hypocrite and thinking
Hmm.
that if I changed my mind or if I did something different, then that's what I meant. I was like going back on my word, or I wasn't,
Yeah.
sticking to something. Whereas now I'm just like, no, like it might seem contradictory, but even like I just had this shift last week where I was like, I don't even want to start saying that keep saying that because that's not even true. I'm not contradicting myself. I am changing my mind. I'm
Correct.
empowering myself to change my mind because now I have new information. And I love the way you put that, like that ability to be able to take in new information and change your mind and give yourself the freedom to do so is what makes me dynamic. So thank you.
Yes, exactly. And I do think like I feel more dynamic. I'm able to be more dynamic. And the more I accept me and the more I live that out into the world, like the less alone I feel.
Yes.
Right. So when people are really thinking about like, if you're listening to this and you're like, what's my emotional experience in the world right now? And if you feel disconnected or you feel really alone, like I think COVID did not help with that at all, right? I put my head down for a couple years and I worked nonstop and I was alone a lot of the time, but I was also creating like alone or a loneliness in how I would interact with other people and me not feeling comfortable enough to show them parts of me or thinking that I needed to present a certain picture to the world and carefully articulate how people viewed me or the opinions that they have. Like A, it's exhausting, but B, it's very, very isolating. And when I started to realize like some of the behaviors that weren't serving me were coming out of feeling very disconnected, very unseen, very unknown, very lonely. And like we went to work for solving that. Like I just feel like my life is so much richer now.
Yes, I love that because when you're holding yourself off from feeling um, negative or uncomfortable emotions, you're actually blocking your capacity to feel positive emotions
Yes.
too, because you don't know the depths of utter complete happiness without
Mhm.
knowing the depths of utter despair. But the amazing thing that happens is like, yes, we're always going to have to feel those shit feelings, but it's not the same as before. And whereas there does get to be then kind of a cap for the amount of like negative stuff we feel, there's like an infinite amount of positive. And the more we allow ourselves to feel that,
Yeah.
the more easily accessible it is to us when shit hits the fan and lifes and things are feeling harder.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also like this is going to sound weird. I kind of get excited to feel the negative feelings too because it's like, oh, I'm living a full ass human life.
Yes.
Like the whole shebang, right? That I think it's wild we get to feel that deeply.
Yes.
Like I might not wish it on someone else, right? But just to have like I'm watching a TV show right now and I from everything that I've heard from people, it's going to like wreck me. And I'm actually excited about like the emotional experience of the show. And just paying attention. I feel like I'm paying so much greater attention just to everything in life, like the beauty, the things that are sweet, like the things that aren't so sweet, the bittersweetness of it all, the moments to your point, like of joy, of delight, of excitement, of all of it. Like I'm just so much more dialed in and present. And like, this is what I'm feeling in this moment. This feels good or it feels bad or, whatever. But I just feel like I'm more alive.
Oh, I love that. Is there anything else we haven't mentioned that you think that would be important for people to hear?
I definitely think trust the process. I'm someone who can get like in my own head about like this feels silly. Again, I don't love to feel silly and some of the stuff like the matrix reimprinting and whatnot. Like I think the exercises might not always feel like what you want it to feel like, but if you just trust the process, you'll be really surprised with what comes out of it. I still sort of like giggle and laugh. I remember being like very resistant to things and then like 4 weeks later I'm like, huh, I just think about this differently now. So I always describe, because I've done EFT with you and then I've done hypnotherapy with another clinician or another person, and I always describe that as like ice melting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for people who love instant gratification, sometimes they want like the aha breakthrough epiphany, like right in the moment. And thought work for me is like that sometimes, where I can very quickly like get out of one thought and into another, and it just sort of clicks into place. But with the emotional work that I've done, it to me is more like ice melting. And the way that I've heard this described is like you can't tell, let's say something starts at like 10 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So it's frozen. Like all the way from 10 to 31 or to 32, it's still frozen.
Mm-hmm.
But the molecules are changing ever so slightly, right? To become a liquid. And then finally, when you hit 33, it melts and like will continue to melt. Even if you just leave it at 33, it will turn to water instead of ice. But you needed to go through all of the stuff from 10 to 32 in order to get the result of 33. And it's very easy to dismiss it because you can't see it happening with your, bare eyes or your naked eye, but it is taking place. And I feel like this work is sort of like that, where it's like the ice will melt, just give it time to melt and trust that the molecules inside of you are changing as they need to throughout the process. And you'll be really surprised with where you end up.
Yes, I love that. And you can still have like powerful shifts, like something that feels like in the moment. But yeah,
Mhm.
that long-term stuff, because I think that's important to mention, because sometimes, like, as with anything, people are always looking for like, I want this one thing to fix me, which I don't
Yeah.
believe it needs to be fixed, and then nothing is going to ever happen again. But that's why I work with people in packages, because it's
Yeah.
like growing into that next step. And then oftentimes when we are transitioning, especially transitioning into something big, that is when all like everything tries to sink in as deep as it
Yeah.
can, because they're like, well, boy, she's getting ready to do something big. That means scary. That means uncertainty, like all coming at it. Right. And
Yes.
that's being able to give yourself, that is what builds that foundation of trust and compassion that I think allows you then for the rest of your life to be
Mhm.
able to build and then take down or add extensions, like whatever you
Yes.
need to. But when you give yourself that time, especially in this world where we are like constantly being told, "Ooh, our attention spans are going down, got to say something in 30 seconds and 15 seconds, got to grab their attention." Like, we're just continuing to like foster that, and being able to like choose to go against that and like kind of re-innovate this idea that we get to like slow down and give
Yeah.
ourselves permission to take time with where we're at, so we can enjoy that process versus think like, oh, this has got to be over in a minute and I've got to
Correct.
see it all, like a before and after laid in front of
Yes.
me.
Yeah, and I have plenty of examples of like the quick ahas. Like I remember like good enough to who, perfect to who, messy to who. Like that broke my brain and I've opted out of so many limiting social constructs as a result of like recognizing a lot of things that a lot of concepts or ideas we buy into are subjective. If
Mm-hmm.
they're subjective, they're made up. And if they're made up, they're optional. And I've just like completely like pushed away from me. I'm like, nope, no, thank you. Like the whole idea of like self-worth. I'm like, someone invented that. I'm all set. Or like messy and imperfect. Like that's a social construct that I don't have to partake in at all. It's just, invented with our thinking. So those were some ahas that were like just massive and quick and kind of that before and after. But I think giving room to experience all of that, like the quick wins, which will come, but then also the ice melting as well. And to just trust the process, I think, all the way through.
What was your favorite thing about working with me?
Um, what a good question. I think your energy. You're really calm, and I felt very safe.
Mm-hmm.
I have such like an intense energy, and I'm quite cognizant of like how I show up, and I think that I like working with people like that as well. But I think for the particular type of work that we were doing in an area that like I so would quickly reject to begin, I'm like, feelings, no thank you. Let's avoid at all costs. Where to be in a space where I felt like very safe, not judged at all, could talk about anything. I felt very comfortable bringing anything up. I think that was like most important. So really, I just think you have the perfect energy for the work you do, and you create a really comfortable container or environment to explore something that, for I'm sure a lot of your people probably are like me, really are hesitant or apprehensive to dive into some of this feelings work. So to have a safe space to do that in, I think that would be my favorite part.
Awesome. Thank you. I received
You're
that.
welcome. Mhm.
And what would you say to somebody who might be like unsure of working with me for whatever reason?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. One, you just got to do it, right? And the reason for that, I know that's like so hard to hear because you're like, but I'm unsure.
Yeah.
You're not going to be sure until you do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the only time you're going to feel certain is after you've already done it. And I remember when I had that epiphany with anything. It's like, well, we don't want to do it until we feel sure. Well, when would you feel sure? After you've done it and you saw that it worked. So then you're like, well, I'll never do it because I'm never going to have that assuredness, right? I'm never going to feel certain or sure. So I'm never going to do it, but I won't do it until I feel sure. You're just trapped. You stay stuck. So for me, I really changed my expectation on how sure I needed to feel in order to do things. So the first person I ever worked with was my hypnotherapist, and I was about 10% sure that that would work. I was very skeptical, and I just decided to say screw it and go for it, and it changed my life. So
Mm-hmm.
now I have a much higher threshold, or I'm much more willing to embark on something. I would definitely say I was probably like 80-20 with working with you. I'm like, I don't know about this tapping stuff. It sounds kind of crazy. And also, like, I've tried some stuff that I thought was crazy before, and maybe it will work. And the way that you described my issues, I was like, oh, she is for me. She understands what I'm about. She understands my relationship with my emotions and like why I'm hesitant and that I don't really like play in this arena much. So I think you definitely demonstrated to me that like you were the right person for me and you understood my hesitancies or my problems. So that again made me feel pretty safe. But you won't feel 100% certain. You just have to be willing to do it without that. That's one. And I think the other thing is like how much more time, whatever your emotional problem is, right? So, like, I could say, like, feeling unknown, feeling alone, feeling unseen, feeling uncomfortable with myself. Like, how much more time do you want to devote to living life that way?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's way more fun on the other side. Like, it's way richer, it's way more vibrant. And I don't know, I'm 30, I just turned 35. So probably started working with you at 32, turned 33, and then, right, that makes sense. Like, I'm so glad, not that it's ever too late. I work with clients who are in their like late 60s and early 70s, and I think that's a beautiful gift to give yourself at any age. But to be able to date through the rest of my 30s and feel very assured and comfortable in my own skin and not needing validation from someone else, that is so exciting. To be early on in my business and have the ability to iterate and feel messy and maybe feel embarrassed or imperfect and be able to move forward and not make decisions out of fear in that way, that's amazing. To be able to have richer connections with my parents who are aging,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I just get to live more of life on the other side. So I would really consider that if you're thinking about working with Jess. It's like, what do you want more of? And
Yes.
how much more time do you want to spend in like one version of your life versus the other version? Like, it's way better over here. Just I'd shorten this one as much as we can and like expand this one as much as we can.
Yeah. That is so beautiful. And it makes me I actually saw this. Somebody asked Viola Davis this question. And I thought her answer was so beautiful. And so I'm just intrigued now. So the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are is a quote. I'm blanking on the guy's name, but what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I totally agree with it with that quote. Um, I think what comes up for me is like first you have to discover who you are,
Mhm.
right? And I think that there's I don't know, even like a courage there of like doing the work to dig and figure it out. And I feel like we did a lot of that work together, like me just figuring out who I am and then having the courage or bravery to like own it and to step fully into it and then to act that out into the world and to show it to people.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like what we did is like do that discovery process and then expand my capacity to like be myself to the world and
Yeah.
to be okay being received fully and completely as me. Um, but I think that's like the greatest gift you can give yourself because I think the lie is that not living that way is sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And
Totally.
I think I tried to live in a way like I've learned, at least for me, but I feel pretty comfortable speaking for other people, mainly because of the work that I do in the world as a coach, right? I feel like I see this play out with others. I don't think it's sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Like the more you suppress or repress or hide or conceal, like there is a toll that takes like really on your soul, I think. And the buffering that you have to do, right? The false pleasure that you have to create for yourself in order to cope or to deal with all of that stuff. Like that steals so much from you. So learning how to not need crutches or coping mechanisms because you're just feeling comfortable living out into the world the person that you actually are. Like I just think it's a false dichotomy to say, well, I could be myself or I could hide it and like hiding it is maintainable. I'm like, no, I think that will kill you eventually, which might be dramatic, but I do. I think it's kind of dramatic.
Yeah. And I think it's true though, right?
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. So beautiful. Thank you so much,
You're
Olivia,
so
for
welcome.
being here.